Now, here's the weird part. At first I actually thought Asus is a little bit late to the game with such a phone. But then again, we have seen phones getting released noticeably later with a Snapdragon 821, a 5.7-inch display and a relatively small camera. So in some way, they may have even started this trend. A trend that I'm still not quite sure what I should think of, but what I am sure of is what I think of this phone. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. And starting off with the design and build, I want to tell you that this phone, in my opinion, is very, very thin for a 5.7-incher. And along with the nice subtle curve towards the back and the curves on the sides, makes it a variable comfortable to use phone. And even though I think it is compact, one-hand usability obviously will be quite hard. What I like though is that the metal here actually isn't all that slippery. What's maybe not that great is the shape of the fingerprint reader. I mean, it looks unique, but my whole finger doesn't always properly fit in, so sometimes I have to actually press. And what's even a little bit more disappointing here is the screen turn-on time, because if I press the button, you will see that this takes a little bit longer than on many other phones, and this, along with the whole unlocking mechanism, takes, in my opinion, a little bit unnecessarily long. The rest though is really nice because the build quality is super strong and sturdy, and we have the autofocus here on the back along with the camera that after all does protrude a little bit, and the LEDs. We have the headphone jack on the top, SD card and SIM card tray on the left. On the bottom in the center we see USB Type-C, the speaker on the right and the microphone on the left. What I definitely like a lot here as well are the buttons, because they sound nice and they feel great with a really great placement because it's easy to reach. We have capacitive buttons on the bottom, as you can see, and on the top we can see the notification LED. And once I turn on the screen, you will see the black border that a lot of people don't like so much, but it is what it is, and that's all I have to say about the design. Now in terms of display, it is a 1080p 5.7-inch display with AMOLED, and that's why you are seeing the flickering, which is a little bit something unfortunate. It only gets picked up, in my opinion, from the camera, because I've never experienced something like that in reality. That's just a normal common thing for AMOLED displays. Otherwise, we have options to calibrate the display a little bit, change things up a little bit, but I have to say, out of the box, I actually am very pleased because it is a very bright display. I measured 600 lux, viewing angles are very stable. Of course, due to AMOLED, we have great contrast at an absolute top black, and the white point was also set very nice. Now, in terms of saturation, it obviously is a little bit oversaturated, as pretty much common for all AMOLED displays, but in a way that I definitely am very satisfied by. And even though I can say this may be a super flagship, high-end, great display, it is a very good flagship display after all, because there are just a few better ones out there, but I'm fully satisfied and I really like it a lot. Now, what do I think of the speaker? Let's see. Okay, the last few seconds were with the auto mode on, and all I can say here is what I like is that it is very loud, and especially if you are in a loud environment and want to watch something, you can still hear it, but the quality definitely isn't great because it's pretty much only highs. But otherwise, I still have to say that the loudspeaker is a very loud one, which is great, and it sounds actually quite decent in terms of the upper highs, but then again, it is a little bit on the weaker side. I would wish for a little bit more mids and bass, but for a phone speaker, it's still absolutely fine. And just about fine, maybe a little bit better is the headphone jack, because we have some nice options here in the settings that allow us for some customization like equalizer and so on, but the sound after all, for an earphone, totally good enough, but for a proper headphone, maybe not quite what I would like to see. Now, in terms of the performance, let's kill off all the apps and see what we see here in terms of launch times, because as you will already notice, it is definitely quite a snappy phone and things launch absolutely nice. And this is also the Snapdragon 821 version with 6 gigs of RAM. So multitasking definitely is very strong, even though I don't notice a huge difference compared to 4 gigabytes. And then also here we already see the super smooth scrolling. And for some reason, some specs I say there is also an 820 version, but the 821 definitely performs absolutely great. I can't really maybe say absolute very best flagship level, and that's why I will only call it very good, because a few Snapdragon 821 or similar phones are just optimized a tiny tad better. But this doesn't change the fact that performs absolutely top. It is very responsive, it is very smooth, it reacts great, the multitasking is top solid, so it is, after all, even though maybe not the very best flagship, after all, a flagship performer. And the same also goes for games, because I could play all the games with very high refresh rates, and even more demanding games were absolutely no problem, so you can enjoy games on this very, very nicely, even though you have to consider the phone will get noticeably warmer. I wouldn't call it hot, but even in normal use, it was, after all, noticeably warm. I wouldn't really matter too much about it, and yes, at some point it could actually throttle, but not in the way that I would have encountered it. I would have really bothered about it, so all this is fine. Now let's get to the battery, and with just 3000 milliamps it is on the smaller side. The good thing here is it charges quite quickly with just about 1 hour and 30. This is nice. What's just not that great is the battery life itself, because 12% for an hour of YouTube is a little bit on the lower end, just about maybe average these days. And my normal use on mobile data in actual reality life with my values was at just about 3 hours. I will generously add half an hour extra because I was in conditions where I know the reception is weaker, and that's what I do on all other phones when I work at that place. So let's say 3.5 hours. I would say about 4.5, maybe 4, a little bit more on mixed use, and 4.5. I don't know if 5 are actually possible on Wi-Fi only, so it's not the very best battery life. And since I called kind of similar stats already like this on the P10 underwhelming, I will have to call it underwhelming here as well. It's okay. It should get some people through the day, but at least not the heavier ones. Like I said, the good thing is at least that it charges very fast. Now let's talk about software. I'm not quite so sure what I should show off here, because here we can see the launcher. I think it's one of the better launchers because it has a lot of options here. We have a theming engine, you can use different icons, you can even adjust the grid, and we have an app drawer, so all is good here. Now here is where things get a little bit, let's say, iffy, because what I definitely like here, since I have the Nougat update, is that animations just feel noticeably nicer and smoother also here for the transitions. This is all great, but I still have to say I'm not quite so sure what to think of the design, because this, in my opinion, still looks a little bit too big and too childish. So I definitely want something more streamlined, more modern, because in terms of features it is absolutely fine. We have, of course, now also dual screen where we can use 2 apps side by side, fingerprint options, like I said, themes, some lock screen options, but the rest, definitely nice things that we have here, but not really all that much I should show off. We have, of course, Asus cover, always on panel, some customized settings like a game mode and so on. Just real quick, when it comes to the sound, I wanted to show this because this is not available if you don't have it plugged in, but as you can see here, we have the gaming mode where we have some extra advanced settings where we can change bass and treble and equalizer. This works for the speaker and for the headphone. Sorry, I said something a little bit different, but I gotta say, in terms of functionality, it works totally out. And now with Nougat, it works also quite nice, looks a little bit nice in terms of animations. And with some themes, you can make the quick settings look nicer. The settings are always the same, something you have to just get used to. It's maybe not the prettiest UI, but at least it's functional, and it's on the newest standard for right now. Now, since we're already talking about standards, let's check the camera. And I gotta say, the selfie camera definitely can produce some really great, at least sharp and also nice colored shots, but it has a few issues with extreme lighting, as you can see here. Sometimes it just feels, in my opinion, a little bit underexposed. Once again, though, sometimes a little bit overexposed, so especially in lighting conditions where it's not all that optimal, it has a little bit of a harder time, but the selfie cam itself definitely has great potential. Here a shot with flash and without, you can see almost not more blurry or something like that, so quite good, and the white balance actually now looks more realistic. Low light pictures seem nice, and even though I didn't have the steadiest hand, we got quite solid results. Maybe not super sharp, but good. Now let's go outside and check this. As you can see here, the potential is absolutely there, because we get some really super detailed and really accurate shots. Sometimes at least greens seem a little bit over the top, but the rest, sharpness is good. One thing that is maybe not that great is the autofocus, because that one had a little bit trouble. I more than usually had to use tap to focus, but then, as you can see, a great outcome, sharp, great colors, exposure in most cases good, like I said, only not so much in extreme conditions, and great pictures. This was very harsh light with the sun being out, and I got great shots. Some just look a little bit overexposed, but this is absolutely fine. Now video, we have 4K, and this is just the only instance where you see a lot of artifacting, because usually it's more fine. Of course, in the clouds you will see this, so a little bit of a higher bitrate would have been nice, but otherwise 4K seems very sharp. The autofocus is a little bit shaky, but usually still reliable. Video is smooth, and I can't really complain. I still like the outcome. Just don't make any super abrupt movements, because there you will just see the artifacting going on. Something a little bit that is not all that great. If we check, one thing that I like to see a lot is 1080p 60. and this looks even smoother. Still the artifacting is going on, but for a 1080p 60 cam, I gotta say this is one of the sharper ones, so I'm still definitely very pleased to see this here, and nothing further to add. So a really top camera, potential is there, it delivers, and what I can't find right now is my mouse pointer to talk about the pros and cons, and this is what I wanna go into right about now, if we just get it right. What I'm not able to do at the moment. What is going on? Okay, here we are. This was completely off. Now let's talk about the pros and cons. We have a high build quality, definitely a very good level. The device is very thin and light for a 5.7-inch phone. We have a very good display. Like I said, almost great, but there are a little bit of better ones out there. After all, a very loud speaker, especially including the outdoor mode, even though it sounds a little bit thinner then. Almost great performance, but just compared to the very best flagship, it still is a flagship performance. After all, it charges quickly, which is nice to see. The UI got better with Nougat. It still is not perfect though. We have a very good photo cam and a very good video cam. So now on the not so great stuff, we have the shape of the fingerprint reader. Not a huge deal because the fingerprint reader on its own works still good. Like I said, the turn on time was a little bit more on the disappointing side. The speaker sounds a bit thin. We have an, after all, underwhelming battery, which is pretty much the biggest con here so far. The UI design is still questionable in some aspects, like being so big and cartoonish. We have a slightly unreliable autofocus. And like I said, the camera in some lighting conditions just isn't all that optimal. So this would have been it. My final words are that for a price of around $500, it is a solid phone and it can still hold up with the competition. But the problem, as I said, is pretty much, and this is the most obvious one, the battery life. The rest would have been absolutely fine, no real complaints here. And what I want to point out is that at least in Europe or in Germany, the 6GB version, so the ultimate model here, is a little bit more on the expensive side. It doesn't seem to be so much the case in the US. So it is a phone that I like a lot, and if you are the power user that needs super battery life, you will definitely get a great experience after all. But then again, I just have to point out the competition is strong. There is an HTC U Ultra, there is an LG G6, an S8 is coming out, and you get quite a similar experience, I think, even if not in some better with the OnePlus 3T in some aspects. So it came a little bit late, and it's just not the brand yet that is really known for the great phones, even though this would be one. So see it as it is, the competition is strong, and this is pretty much the biggest issue of this phone, and that's where I want to leave it. I hope you liked the review, maybe give it a thumbs up and also a subscription. Until next time though, bye.